Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar on how to get published in an open access journal and how to improve the impact of your research. I am very happy to organize this webinar today with Taylor and Francis, one of the most renowned publishing houses in the world and also one of the leading publishing houses when it comes to open access journals. So before we start, I would like to welcome our main speaker of today, Dr. Victoria Babbitt. Victoria is joining us from Sweden. Hi, Victoria. Thanks for joining.
Hello.
To Victoria's persona, she's the Director of Researcher Development and Outreach at Taylor & Francis. Victoria joined Taylor & Francis in 2008 and throughout the past decade has supported societies, editors, and authors as they navigate the rapidly changing publishing landscape. Her work involves engaging with global researcher communities to build knowledge and capacity related to publishing and editorial activities. Prior to joining Taylor & Francis, she pursued a PhD in geography, focusing on migration at the University of Washington in Seattle in the United States. So it's really an exciting background you have, Victoria, and I think our attendees today will learn a lot and get a lot of good advice and tips from you, how they can craft their career when it comes to publishing in peer-reviewed journals, especially open access journals. Open access journals, it's an area which in India still is, I would say, fairly unknown. So I'm very happy that we have a very good number of attendees today who want to know about it, learn about it, and also then, of course, share it with their peers in the coming days. My name is Samrat Kumar. I am the country representative for EURAccess. Some of you already know me and us. We've been doing quite a few webinars over the last months for you guys. This is a part of our career development webinar series. Some of you maybe have participated in our previous webinars on publishing, and some of you, as I see from the registration list, are new. So welcome to the old ones and welcome to the new ones. I'll just briefly tell you a bit about EURAccess for those who are new, what we are doing and how we are connected with the European Union's research program known as Horizon 2020 and what's in for you. And then I'll quickly hand over the mic to our main speaker, to Victoria. So let me just share my screen with you. Just Victoria, could you let me know if it's visible?
Let's see. I'm just seeing our.
Okay, I just have to share it now.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I can see it.
So what I will tell you briefly is about Horizon 2020, which is the EU's Research and Innovation Framework Program. It's the largest framework program in the world. And as maybe some of you know, it's coming to an end this year. But good news is that their new program is in the horizon already, Horizon Europe, for another 7 years. The budget has been finally approved by the EU Parliament, and we are ready to go for a lot of exciting years of research and innovation with Europe and the world. This program currently has still a few months to go, so there are still some open calls, interesting calls for you. It has 3 main pillars: excellent science, industrial leadership, and societal challenges. And how can you participate now as an Indian national in this Horizon 2020 program of the European Union? There are 4 main ways. You can participate as a scientist in one of the so-called Marie Sklodowska-Curie action programs. These are specifically PhD and postdocs positions which are available for people from any part of the world under this Horizon 2020 program. You can apply for one of the European Research Council grants or become a team member. This is more for experienced researchers, those who already have a PhD or postdoc and looking for advancing their career. This is a very, I think, one of the most prestigious grants which a researcher can get in his career. They're 5 to 6 years period and several million euros. We're having actually a webinar on that next week. So for those of you who already have a PhD and postdoc or are interested to really design and create your own project and get funding from the European Union, join us next week for this webinar. Another way to join is through collaborative research project. These are so-called research innovation and innovation actions. And lastly, there are pre-identified joint co-funded calls between the EU and the partner country, in our case, India. So both the European Union and the Indian Ministry of Education, they identify some certain calls under Horizon 2020, which are of priority and importance to India as well. And there are joint fundings, and Indian and European institutions can form consortia and apply for these grants. Okay. I think for most of you who are in their PhD career, the Marie Skłodowska career actions are very interesting to look into. Here we have your research career ladder. You can find yourself in one of those steps. You can see that on a student postgraduate level, the EU has the Erasmus Plus program. That's also a student mobility program, scholarships for Indian students to go and complete a master in Europe. Then once you are in a PhD postdoc area, you can apply for the Marie Skłodowska career actions. And once you move up the ladder towards junior professor, associate professorship, the ERC grants are very interesting. And then almost maybe before your retirement as a senior professor and a very well-established professor, you can look at the advanced grants also. These are also very, like, for as the word says, for advanced researchers. Anyway, let's spend a few minutes at the Marie Skłodowska career action programs. We have 4 programs under it. We have the individual fellowships, which are postdoc positions. We have the innovative training networks, which are PhD positions. We have RISE, which is a research innovation staff exchange program. And we have co-fund. These are more particularly targeted towards European universities to get funding from the EU. We will focus today on the ITN, on the innovative training networks, and at the postdocs. So, innovative training networks. These are extraordinarily good funded projects by the European Union. We have currently almost 150 projects for 2020, and there are 3 basic categories. There are the European Training Network, the European Industrial Doctorate, and the European Joint Doctorate. So what is the ITN? These are tailored towards creating and producing a new generation of creative, entrepreneurial, and innovative early stage researchers. It's all about creating excellence, and it's about bridging the academic and non-academic sector through international mobility to interdisciplinarity and especially intersector mobility. So if you think that you are a person like this who would like also to work in the non-academic sector, we would highly recommend to you to look into these different programs, projects under the ITN and see if there are PhD positions available for you. These are really top class opportunities, especially also helping you to get a foot into the industry. Okay. So how do you apply for it? It's basically you're applying for a job. These PhD positions are one of the most generous positions in the world with a very good salary, higher than any other PhD programs offered by European countries. You get not only a salary, a monthly, but you also get living and family and mobility allowance on top of that. The projects already are set by the beneficiaries. That means the university, the consortium which has received the grant. They have designed the project and they are looking then for suitable PhD candidates, which could be you because it's open to all fields. Like we have STEM, social science, humanities, and economies. I will tell you also how you can find those PhD positions in a short moment. The deadlines are not fixed, but calls are open now for 2020, the projects. You can look at the Euraxis job website where all the PhD positions, all the announcements of all these ITN programs are listed. What you need, of course, you need to be qualified to undertake a PhD. You have to have, of course, a transcript of your grades, a CV, personal statement, a referee. The eligibility, of course, is different from each program, but all information are available on the Euraxis job website. Now we come quickly to the individual fellowships, which are postdoc opportunities. Here we have two categories: the European Fellowship, which means any researchers from any part of the world can apply to come to Europe to do 12 to 24 months of his postdoc studies. And then we have the Global Fellowship, which means the other way around. People from Europe, based in Europe, can go to any host institution in the world, in our case, India, to do their postdoc for between 1 and 2 years, but have a returning clause to return to Europe for the last year of their postdoc. The European Fellowship basically means Indian researchers applying to go to Europe. They can choose a host in any of the 27 member states or 16 associated countries which are associated to the Horizon 2020 program. These are countries which are not part of the European Union, but are associated to this program. For example, we have countries like Norway, Switzerland, Israel, Turkey. So you have 43 countries you can actually choose to go to for your postdoctoral research stay. And it lasts from 1 to 2 years. The Global Fellowship, on the other hand, as I said, is that you can go from Europe to India. An Indian university can host a European national or postdoctoral researcher at their lab department. The entire cost, it's entirely funded by the EU, so there are no costs for the Indian institution. The Indian organization becomes the partner institution in the proposal. You can apply for these postdoc positions and all nationalities, no age restriction, but you must be affiliated to an institution. Mobility is a must. You have to come to Europe, and you have to be an experienced researcher. Basically means you will have to have your doctoral degree or at least 4 years full-time research experience at the time of the call of the deadline. This is a bottom-up program. There are no priorities given, thematic or disciplinary. It's about your research. If you think that you have a very good research idea and you want to get funding and you think it's really innovative, excellent, you should definitely apply for it. It's open to all areas of research, social science and humanities included. Good news is that India is performing very well in this individual fellowship, in this postdoc fellowship program. Outside of Europe, Indians are the largest recipients of this grant, more than 300 in the last 10 years. Just to give you figures, you can see a very handsome living allowance, which is basically a salary, almost 5,000 euro, mobility allowance, family allowance, and also research networking training costs are also given per month. Now, how does it work? First of all, you have to find a host organization in a European country which is ready to host you, and of course you have to find a supervisor who is convinced about your proposal and wants to support you. You write a joint proposal with your host, with your supervisor, and apply. If you get selected, the grant is given to your host organization. Now, for this year, the deadline has closed. Today is the last day of applying for this postdoc position, but good news is that also next year this call will be open. Approximately April will be the time when the call will open again. So if you are thinking to apply for next year, it's a good time to check out what this individual fellowship program is about and how you can apply. It's better to start earlier than later. So you can go, of course, to the websites on the Europe.eu website, or you can go on Facebook and find about the Marie Curie Actions, or also Horizon 2020 website gives you a fairly good overview about this program. And of course, Euraxis, our website also provides a fairly good overview about different opportunities for PhD and postdoc candidates. So just a summary again, how to participate: find a relevant call which is suited to you, find a partner, a supervisor, a host, submit a proposal and get involved. There are often still questions regarding the Brexit, the UK leaving the European Union, and how the funding is working for people who got grants and wanted to move to the UK or are still planning to move to the UK. So as for now, the withdrawal agreement between the European Union and the UK foresees that the UK will continue to participate in the current program until the end of 2020, including Marie Skłodowska Curie Actions and European Research Council grants. it is as if the UK was an EU member state until the closure of the programs. So it means you can, as a beneficiary, still continue to take part in the grants if you're planning to move to the UK under the current agreement until the end of the date, even if it is after 2020. Let's say you got a PhD now, or you're applying now and you are granted, and the PhD is for 3 years beyond 2020, you will still get the grant money. Okay. Now, the European Union, the European Commission has launched a platform over 15 years ago known as Euraccess, which was made to help to reduce the barriers of mobility for researchers coming to Europe. So what are the barriers? There are, of course, legal barriers, there are social barriers, economical barriers, and for that, entire infrastructure has been created to help researchers to have a very easy, smooth access to the European research area, to European research programs. And this is called Euraccess, your gateway to Europe. It has 4 main pillars. The first one is a job and funding database. We have a portal which offers you daily fresh calls, open calls in different countries, different sectors, different research positions. I will show you very shortly how to utilize, how to use the job and funding portal. It's the largest job database for researchers in the world. We have an information assistance portal as well, where we provide you with very basic information about what it means to come to Europe, what it means to live in Europe, what it means about your social security, your health, how if you want to bring your family, if you need accommodation, if you need schooling for your children. So all kind of support is given by our information and assistance service. We have over 600 service centers across Europe in different countries. And in each and every country, we have an overhead organization which you can contact, and they can also direct you to the right person to help you with your personal questions and queries regarding a move to Europe as a researcher. Another tool which we have is the partnering tool. In our database, you can also find researchers and organizations who are have a similar background as you. And if you're looking to like maybe start a project and you need international partners, you can look for that. But you can also find hosting institutions. Many of the European institutions are looking for who have an ITN program or who are looking for an individual fellowship postdoc candidate. They announce it, and you can find those hosting institutions on our website. It's very comprehensive. The fourth leg of Euraccess is our worldwide team. We have we can link you with the rest of the world as well, not only with Europe. We have hubs in ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand, China, India, of course, Japan, Latin America and the Caribbean, North America, and South Korea. So we are kind of a global team where we're trying to connect researchers with Europe, but also globally. Just to give you a few figures, annually we publish around 60,000 job vacancies in Europe. 17,000 research organizations and universities are registered with us. We have almost 1 lakh users. Average 500 funding opportunities available every month, also for entrepreneurs and startups. And we cover all areas of science, technology, innovation, also social sciences and humanities. Just to give you show you the Euraccess worldwide map. As I said, we have hubs in on different continents, and very dedicated team facilitating researchers collaboration and supporting researchers globally. Just wanted to briefly show you our website. If you come to the website here, you see Euraccess India. We have here jobs and funding, career development, partnering. Let me just show you our website here. For instance, we have our news section where you can see our latest events, news on research, EU, India, EU collaboration. Right now, for instance, there's an opportunity for 14 PhD candidates under the Marie Curie ITN Hybrid Boost program. To have a look. We are also having events like the ERC event, which I told you next week. So that's something which we update daily for you guys. Then if you go to the job funding section, you just press job and funding. Then you have here search for job offer. And here you can see there's an engine field. You can have research field, research profile, sector, country, choose country. Since our main speaker, guest speaker, is from Sweden, let's see what opportunities are in Sweden at the moment posted on the Eurexis portal. You see 170, and we click on search, and then we see all the open positions available in Sweden right now. Doctoral student in computer science, PhD student in ecology and evolution, postdoc, the effect of climate change. And you see there are plenty of opportunities for postdoc PhD students in Sweden. International candidates can apply. We also have a career and development section where we have like a toolkit how to improve your skills and how to enhance your international career. We also have information assistance side, living in Europe, working in Europe, living in Europe. So a lot of interesting articles and documents and guidance. And we have the national portals as well. So if you are interested to go to a specific European country like Finland, France, you just go there, like let's say you go Eurexis France, and then you have a dedicated website on France by Eurexis. And here you will find all about visas, mobility, and many different information is there. So just to go back to the Eurexis India website, we'll go. That's the last thing I wanted to show you. So if you are interested and you haven't signed up yet, please sign up and become a member for free and use the portal. There is also a guidebook how to use the portal, how to create a CV, how to upload it, how to become visible to other researchers, and how to get alerts when there are job vacancies in your particular field. Yeah? Okay, to the slides. Now, as I told you, have a look at our website. See what we are offering. As I said, we offer also, we give you fresh information in our newsletters, in our bi-weekly flash notes. We organize info sessions, webinars, and you will be alerted about that automatically. Upcoming events, if you are interested to know what's next, we have the Science Slam competition, which I will just introduce in a short moment. This is our annual flagship event. We have an ERC grant webinar next week on 15th of September, and then we have another webinar with Taylor and Francis on publishing ethics and researcher integrity on September 25. I also wanted to draw your attention to a global survey which we have just launched, Eurexis Global Survey on the impact of COVID on researchers' mobility. And this is a survey which will be very helpful if you can take some few minutes and fill it out and explain us what are the difficulties you're facing as a researcher in terms of mobility, because it will help the EU and its policymakers to craft a strategy for the future. This is a very important survey. Please take your time and fill it out, because we are collecting data from all our hubs and providing those to the European Union, to the European Commission, to draft a new strategy for post-COVID-19. As I mentioned already, the Science Slam is our flagship event. It's about having fun and showing that science can be fun and entertaining. We ask you to send us a video and present your research idea, research project in a fun and entertaining way. And from the best 5 will have the chance to compete in the live finals, and the winner will win a round trip ticket to Europe and visit a research institute of his or her choice in 2021. So it's an exciting prize and an exciting competition. Show your research to the world, and makes science fun and accessible to a larger audience. You can dance, sing, you can use live experiments, everything is allowed. And here we have the winners of the last 2 years, Prabhahan from NCBS Bangalore and Sayani from the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. They both won the first prize and the ticket to Europe. So please join this our community. We are more than research. It's also being a part of a larger global family. And I warmly invite you to go to our website to sign up and become a member of Eurexis. So this is our contact details. I guess you know this already, india@eurexis.net. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And for registration, just go to our website, india.eurexis.org. thank you so much for your kind attention. I would like to now on the floor to Victoria and wishing you all a very nice afternoon with Victoria. Just remember, we have a chat session function also. You can pose your questions to Victoria during her presentation as well, or at the end of her presentation. We will have a dedicated Q&A session with her. Okay, Victoria, thank you. The floor is yours.
Great. Great. Thank you. There we go. And I am going to actually turn off my camera during the presentation, mainly because we're having a storm here in Sweden, and so my internet's a bit weak today. So I just want to make sure that the audio doesn't fall out, but I'll turn my camera on again after I finish presenting. So there we go. Great. Well, thank you so much for that great overview of your Access India. You guys are doing great things. I'm really interested in that India Science Slam. That looks fantastic. So as said, my name's Victoria, and I'm based in Stockholm, Sweden. Actually, today I'm based on an island outside of Stockholm in the middle of the Baltic Sea. And I have been working with Taylor & Francis since 2008 in a variety of positions, but I have to say the position I hold now is my absolute favorite because I'm constantly interacting with researchers from all over the world. And today, as said, we're going to be focusing on impact and looking at open access within that context of increasing your visibility and the impact of your work. And I've broken down this presentation into two different parts. So the first part is pre-publication, what you need to think about at that stage, and then the second part being post-publication. And I'm not going to do a deep dive into a lot of different issues with publishing. As said, we're going to be doing a session on research and publishing ethics later in the month, which will do a deep dive into ethics, which is a huge issue. But today it's going to be a light touch on some aspects of publishing. And I'm always happy to come back and do a deeper dive into things like peer review and that sort of thing. Let's see. There we go. So why do we need to discuss research at impact? Why is it important? I thought I would just give you a little bit of a glimpse of the publishing landscape today. So today there are about 10,000 publishers in the world, 5,000 of which are indexed in Scopus. And of those publishers, they're publishing around 33,000 active English language peer review journals, with another 9,000 plus non-English language peer review journals out there. And this number traditionally grows year on year by about 3.5%. These journals are publishing over 3 million articles per year. And this number traditionally grows by 3% year on year. And just to clarify here, these numbers are actually a couple years old. This is from the STM report from 2 years ago. So I'm sure that they've grown exponentially. And the way they've grown is respectively by about 5% and 4%. So we're seeing growth of 5% on the actual number of journals and 4% on the number of articles. And the reason why they're not necessarily matched up is because a lot of the journals we're seeing launched right now are open access journals. So there are a lot of open access journals in different fields. They might be very niche, so they might not be publishing necessarily a lot of articles. So that's where you see the difference there. And a lot of this growth is also due to an increase in research and development spend on the part of governments globally. And that spend is going towards supporting anywhere between 7 to 9 million researchers, depending on how you define researchers. So in India, there's about 156 per million. Interestingly, only 20% of those researchers are authors. So much time and effort is put towards the research and writing, and in this very busy landscape, the hope is after you've put in all that effort that your work will actually be read and cited. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And there are a few things that researchers can do even before they publish to break through all that noise and to make an impact. First of all, just the basics. You want to create the conditions for your future success. And the foundation for success for any research is a strong international network, irrespective of the field you're working in. This network will provide the foundation for your future success in conducting and communicating your research. So, how does one go about building a network? Here are some basic tips. First of all, start locally and start early. Clearly, the base of any academic researcher's network is their advisor, their committee, and their cohort that they're going through their PhD program with. Don't take these people for granted. Make sure that you're reciprocating the support that they give you. And make sure to take every opportunity to expand that network in your institution. You may come into contact with people whose work doesn't necessarily intersect with yours at present, but you may have opportunities to collaborate in the future. And when you have speakers visiting, make the effort to meet with them if possible. So, maybe they're going to be too busy to meet with you when they come to give a seminar, but you can exchange contact information, and then you can follow up if appropriate. And make sure to look outside of your own department to adjacent departments where there may be possibilities for collaboration. Research all the key associations and listservs and online groups for your field and join them, engaging in a thoughtful manner. And obviously, conferences are one of the best opportunities to expand your network. And it's a little bit challenging right now since everything is digital, but there's still potential to make connections at those even digital conferences. But you really need to think about conferences as work. You need to treat them as work, even if it's an in-person conference where there's a lot of mingles and things like that. So this means properly preparing, doing your research ahead of time, reviewing the program, and reviewing the attendees list. And again, this is a little bit tricky in our current state because a lot of that information in terms of attendees lists is fairly fluid. A lot of those conferences are opening up to a broader public and maybe not detailing that. But if you have the opportunity, do that due diligence to figure out who's going to be there. If there are people that you would like to meet, consider sending them an email beforehand and inviting them to a coffee, again, in the real world. But when you do send that email, make sure to be clear about what you'd like to discuss and why it might be of interest to them. Make sure that you can quickly and succinctly introduce yourself and articulate your research. Especially, again, when you're in those in-person conferences and maybe there's a mingle at the beginning and you see some people that you really admire that you don't know, it's nice to have in your back pocket a really quick summary of who you are and what you're working on and why it's important, why they would want to talk to you. I always encourage people to try the elevator pitch out with their friends. And you can do little competitions, who can describe their work in the most engaging and succinct manner within 2 to 3 minutes. And make sure to be curious about others' research and academic lives. And this is especially helpful if you're shy and you're in a conference situation and you want to engage with people, but you don't really feel comfortable doing that. The one thing that we all know is researchers generally love talking about their work. So if you come up to somebody and say, "Hi, my name's so-and-so, I'm based at this institution. What do you work on?" You'll be, the conversation will take off at that point. So along with the point I made earlier about joining online groups, social media can help you network virtually. You want to investigate the groups that are relevant within your field, and I'll talk about this a little bit later. And the same goes for other social media sites. Many are specific to certain fields, so ask your colleagues for tips. And again, make sure to engage thoughtfully. Don't compulsively respond to everything or post material that isn't furthering the conversation. Treat these forums as workplaces and make a professional, engaging impression. As said, more on this in a bit. But most importantly, with this stage of the process, don't forget to have fun. Networking is intrinsically a social activity, so it should be a bit fun. So one of the most important decisions you can make regarding impact is choosing the right journal to publish your work in. And before investigating possible journal options, it's essential to spend time understanding your project and the audience you would really like to reach. So throughout your career, you're likely to be involved in many types of research, producing a variety of content. And typically people focus solely on the research article. But over time, you may publish review articles, whether that's a literature review, a theory review, a systematic review. You might, want to publish position pieces or case studies or book reviews. The list goes on and on. And again, different types of writing will be perfect for different projects. Sometimes your work is going to be written for specialists in your field, but you may also choose to engage in public scholarship, writing for the or so take the time to determine your objectives. And when you begin investigating the appropriate place to publish, remember you're joining an ongoing conversation in your field. So you want to make sure that you're contributing thoughtfully to that conversation with original ideas. There are many factors to take into consideration when choosing an appropriate journal to submit your manuscript to. So you might think about age, how well established a journal is. You might think about the history of the journal. Has it published key research or key thinkers in the field? You might be interested to know if what the affiliation of the journal is. Is it a part of a major society within your field, or is it published by a publisher that is well respected? The scope of the journal is obviously going to be very important. Is it a niche journal just focusing on a tight subject area, or is it a broad subject area, a generalist journal? And obviously audience, we talked about that before. Who reads the journal? You want to make sure that you're targeting the right audience. And impact, we always talk about impact. And when we talk about impact, it tends to be shorthand for the impact factor. But there's many different ways of measuring impact that are relevant in different fields. So it's really about understanding what is relevant in your field or in your institution in terms of impact, and seeking out journals that will kind of tick that box. The editorial board will tell you everything you need to know about a journal usually, because it's going to be built with people that specialize in different aspects of the field that are being covered in that journal. So anytime a journal wants to update their editorial board, they'll think about what kind of research they want to pull in. They might be thinking geographically too. Maybe they want to start increasing the number of Indian authors that are submitting. So they might find a specialist in a particular area that's based in an Indian institution. And that person can help be kind of an ambassador for the journal in their community. Publishing models, we're going to talk about that in a second, is increasingly important. Peer review model as well. There's many different styles of peer review, from single blind to double blind to open peer review. And all that information will be in the instructions for authors, so you'll understand if you do your due diligence in the journal, you can understand what kind of processes they have in place. And then the rejection rate can be important to people. Sometimes journals post the rejection rate, sometimes they don't. But usually if you're looking at some of these other characteristics of a journal, for instance, their impact and how large the journal is, how well established it is, you'll get a sense of how competitive it is at the end of the day. But we do see pretty high rejection rates for most of our journals, irrespective of whether they have an impact factor or not. So some or all of these characteristics might be of importance to you. Still, even after doing all that work of kind of investigating different journals, it can be challenging to choose a journal. So, there are many tools out there to help you with this decision. So at Taylor & Francis, we have a journal suggester, and many other publishers have different tools that are similar to this. And the journal suggester basically will match your abstract, the abstract you've written for your paper, with potential journals based on their aims and scope statement, which is incredibly important for you to read and understand, because that will tell you exactly what a journal is about. So this little tool will provide you a list of journals to investigate further. So you plop in your aims and scope and click on it, and it will give you a little list of journals that you can investigate. But our advice is to select a few journals that are a good fit for your work and create a list and rank that list from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, however many journals you found that you think the work you're currently engaged with would be a good fit. And when it's time to submit, start at the top of that list. The first journal you're going to submit to is your number 1 journal. And if your number 1 choice isn't interested in your manuscript, then move down to number 2, and so on and so forth, until you find a journal that is excited about your work and would like to publish it. So one of the characteristics I mentioned was publishing model. And by that, I mean whether the journal is a subscription-based journal or whether it's an open access journal or platform. So what might be the benefits of publishing in an open access journal or platform? The main benefits are greater visibility, and with that, potentially greater impact, both within the research community and the broader public. And the access and the visibility and impact can spur innovation and collaboration. So at Taylor & Francis, we have seen that open access articles typically receive substantially more citations. So we see about a 32% increase and greater readership with over 6 times as many views or downloads. And increasingly, in many countries, regions, and institutions, open access has become a requirement, or at least strongly encouraged. And definitely this is within the EU. Usually when it is required, support is made available at the institutional level or via funding bodies. And here's an interesting example of the impact of publishing open access. So the author here, Kostas Karagiorgis, published a review article on music and sport in the International Review of Sports and Exercise Psychology in 2011. The review paper has been downloaded over 9,000 times and has been cited in over 40 individual research pieces, has been featured in the International Business Times, Huffington Post, and The Atlantic, which is a kind of prestigious magazine in the United States. And the article is placed in the top 5% of all research outputs scored by Altmetrics, which I'll talk about a little bit later. It's also in the top 5 most read and cited articles for the journal. And here he summarizes 2 key points that many make about open access. One, that it allows for greater inclusivity, and secondly, that it has the potential to democratize scientific knowledge. But for those of you that are a little bit unfamiliar with open access, I thought we could take a step back and look at what open access actually entails. So there are 2 basic elements to open access. The first is making content freely available, and the second is making content reusable by a third party. And I'm going to briefly discuss both of these elements. So there are many terms thrown around when talking about open access. People will talk about gold open access and green open access and bronze open access and diamond open access, and the list goes on and on and on. It seems that there's a new term every day. Today, I'm just going to focus on gold open access. So gold open access essentially entails making the PDF, the version of record, freely available online. And there are 2 ways in which an author can publish open access with Taylor & Francis and many other publishers, either in a full open access journal or in what we call a hybrid journal. So a full open access journal will publish all of their content open access. These journals are not funded by subscriptions. Instead, most of them charge an APC, an article publishing charge. However, many journals are funded by societies or institutional agreements at times. And in this case, either the author doesn't pay any APC or they may pay a reduced fee. But all of this information should be clearly presented on the journal website under the instructions for authors. And then often your funder or institution will cover the charge, as I mentioned in the previous slide. And just a note, for authors based in India, they're eligible for a 50% discount on APCs with Taylor and Francis journals. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're looking at open access journals on our website. For hybrid open access, this is when an author chooses to publish open access in a journal that is subscription funded. So it's typically, it's a subscription-based journal. And much of the content is thus not freely accessible unless your institution or you yourself have a subscription. And these journals also charge an APC to cover the publication costs for the open access article. However, many institutions and consortia have agreements with publishers to cover the APC costs for hybrid journals. So again, it's just really to do your research when you're looking at an open access journal to understand what the requirements are in terms of fees. And all this information should be very, very clearly detailed on the journal website under the instructions for authors. So the second element of open access that I mentioned is how your work can be used after publication by others. If you publish open access, you'll be asked to choose a Creative Commons license, which describes how people can use your work in the future. Some journals don't give you a choice on which type of license you can use, so it's important that you investigate prior to submission, just in case you have any concerns regarding your research and how people might want to use it. So here are the licenses. We have CC BY, and this license allows authors to use your work in any way they choose, as long as they clearly attribute authorship and the original publication. And this is pretty much the default license for fully open access journals. So just be aware of that. There's also CC BY NC, and the NC stands for non-commercial. And here an author can use your work in any manner, but they cannot profit from it. For instance, they can't include your article in a book that they're subsequently planning on charging money for. The next slide is CC BY ND, and ND stands for non-derivative. And here the author can't change your work in any way. They must use it in its original format. For instance, this would mean that they could not translate your work. And lastly, I included CC BY SA. And you may not see this one quite as often, but it's an important one because it means that when people use your work, they need to attach the same license as you attached originally. And this is important when you're using other people's open access work, just to be aware of what license they have attached. So with the rise of open access, we have seen an emergence of what are often called predatory publishers or journals. And I'm sure many of you have been contacted by these publishers who show enthusiastic interest in your work and ask you to submit to their journal. They often state that the peer review process is unrealistically short, so they'll talk about days rather than weeks. The website might feature information that's incorrect or misleading, such as stating they have a global impact factor. Just be aware, impact factors are called just that, never anything else. And here's some key characteristics of predatory journals. They will, I won't even say often, they will always have hidden or unclear author fees because it really is a money-making venture. So that's why I said all of the information about APC should be clearly detailed on a journal website under the instructions for authors. You should never be surprised by a fee if you've done the proper research. They tend to lack quality peer review of articles by experts in the field, and they tend to guarantee acceptance and or the promise of very fast publication times. So they'll talk about a week or 48 hours. If you want your work, your research to be read and respected by others in your field, locally and or internationally, it's important to avoid publication in these fake journals. En masse, they erode the credibility of all the research that's published in them. However, there are some resources to help you make some sound decisions about where you would like to publish when considering open access publishing. For instance, a key resource is Think, Check, Submit. And this is a cross-industry initiative which aims to help researchers make informed choices and to choose trusted journals to publish their research in. So Think, Check, Submit can help you identify high-quality journals which would be appropriate for submitting your research. And it can protect you against fraud and publishing malpractice and that sort of thing. But I would stress the best approach is always to seek advice from respected and experienced colleagues. So folks that have published a lot and have a good sense of what the legitimate journals are in the field. And also your librarians, you know, they work a lot with publishers and probably have a good sense of what the journals, what the relevant journals are. The next resource I have here is DOAJ, and this is a database for open access journals. And the journals in this database have been screened to ensure that they're legitimate. However, like many databases, there's an assessment period for each journal. So new journals that might be legitimate journals might not be listed immediately. And in those cases, you'll need to make sure that the journal in question is published by a respected publisher. And here's where this last organization can help, OASPA. So OASPA is an organization for publishers and service providers working with open access. Members need to meet certain standards to be included. So if the journal you're considering publishing in, again, we're talking about open access here, is not included in the DOAJ and or their publisher is not a member of OASPA, you should proceed with extreme caution. Right, so once you've published, you of course would like people to be able to read and find your work. And this begins with the basics. The first elements of your article that potential readers will likely see, and that's going to be the title and the abstract. Now, title styles and format can vary somewhat depending on subject area and individual writing style. However, there are a few tricks to keep in mind when composing your title. First of all, write the title after you've written your paper. Though if you're like me and struggle with coming up with good titles, it's not a bad idea to have a piece of paper next to you as you're writing to jot down ideas that you can consider at the end of the process. You should think about keeping your titles short and very much to the point. The title should really tell the potential reader what the article is about in the most basic terms. Most advice is about 16 words or fewer for a title. You'll want to include some of the essential terms in your paper in your title and avoid any jargon or abbreviations. Again, it should be the simplest description of what the research is about, and most people won't understand the abbreviations. Make sure that your title captures the subject of your paper and stands out, either for its clarity or for its creativity. And why might abstracts be important? Well, abstracts should tell the reader what the article is about. I think of them as mini film trailers. They should give a sense of what the story is about without providing all the details. So I think about them a little bit more like a mysterious French film trailer rather than an American film trailer where you never have to go to the movie because they've shown you everything. And here's some basic tips. It's difficult, like with the title, to write a decent abstract before you actually finish the paper, because the abstract is essentially an overview of the content. Make sure you know the parameters for the particular journal you're submitting to. Most have word counts and many have really specific guidance on format and structure. So they want their abstracts to look a certain way. Think about who your potential audience is again and write it for them. So if you're targeting practitioners, you might use different language than you would if you are targeting people who are deeply embedded in your research area. And kind of carrying on from that point, really choose the language carefully. And again, think about those keywords or terms. Think about how someone might search for your work. And if your work is interdisciplinary in nature, think about how those other disciplines talk about the subject, because they might, again, use slightly different words. Once you've written your abstract, I encourage you to do just a free write. But once you've finished writing it up, go through and remove any unnecessary words. So you're just focusing on essential information. And during the peer review process, you are likely to revise your paper, possibly a number of times. And every time you revise your paper, go back and take a look at that abstract and make sure that it still reflects the paper, the new version of the paper, because you might need to revise that as well. And lastly, read your abstract out loud to yourself and have others read it for fluency. If your abstract's difficult to read, it's highly unlikely that people are going to click through to the article because they're going to assume that the article is really poorly written as well. And lastly, we have, along with the titles and abstract, authors are often asked to provide keywords that will be included with the metadata for the article. And these act as little flags and searches to help readers find your work. So make sure to identify the words or phrases that will be effective in searching for your work. Use synonyms just to think about the fact that people might use different words when searching for that topic. And when you're using words, and especially when you're using phrases, be specific to narrow down the search results. So think about using qualifiers if you're using a term that is general, like I have in this example here. So if I type homelessness into Google, I'm going to end up with a lot of information about services in Stockholm and various things like that. But if I frame it with Swedish and policy, then I'm going to start getting white papers, academic articles, organizations, government bodies, and that sort of thing. So the most important thing is just to give it a shot and test words in Google Scholar and just regular Google, and see what results you get. Is it what you would expect? If not, think about refining them again. So I've been talking a lot about keywords and phrases, and here is where they make a difference. So search engine optimization, SEO. What is it? Why does it matter? SEO is simply the process of attempting to improve a web page's search engine rankings. And I know it seems bizarre, but your article will become a web page eventually. So you really need to kind of think about how that web page will perform. Google and other search engines prioritize content that they see as interesting or high quality or relevant, and they display such content higher up on the search rankings. So what does this mean for researchers? Well, the higher the ranking of your article, the more people will discover, read, and ultimately cite your research. And I thought we would just take a look at it in terms of Google Scholar. I was doing a bit of research on SEO, and I came across some tips on how to improve results in Google Scholar. So here are just a few tips to keep in mind. The first one is titles should contain keywords within the first 65 characters. Again, keep those titles short and concise, but the keywords should be at the beginning of your title. An abstract should have the main keywords within the first 230 characters. And I found this really interesting. Why do you imagine that could be? Well, Google's meta descriptions, i.e. the page summary that shows in a search list, so the kind of grayed out bit under the title of the web page, can only be 230 characters long. So when people are browsing results, they'll be able to see those keywords with a quick glance, and then hopefully click through. You want to make sure that your metadata is complete, which really shouldn't be an issue if you're working with an established publisher, because that's our job. Citation impact, rank. So, obviously we can't control who cites us, but there are other things that we can do ourselves. So don't forget to fully cite your previous and in progress work. And the other thing, think about other people as well. So accurately and consistently cite others. So really think about the spelling. Consistent spelling of authors' last names and initials is really important to ensure articles and citations are correctly identified by search engines. And make sure that you have clear subheadings for your reference list. Again, that helps with the kind of search capabilities. When you're using graphics, make sure to use graphics that can be read by search engines. So that's vector instead of raster graphics. And I've featured the endings of those types of graphics on the slide here so that you can be aware of what to look for. And make sure to link to articles from social media, from blogs, from your website, from your department website, as many websites as possible. The more links to your article from a variety of websites, the more search engines such as Google will value and highlight your content. And ultimately, the higher up in the results list your article will be placed. Another key resource for researchers is ORCID. And with ORCID ID, you're basically not a name, you're a number, is what they like to say. And those of you who have common names will see the advantage of this. The great thing about ORCID is it provides a registry of unique researcher identifiers. So on the ORCID system, you list all of your authored papers, research grants, conference presentations, university positions, and attach IDs. And the great thing about ORCID is it's not only you inputting this information, but ORCID has partnerships with different institutions, so they feed in this information as well. So the important thing to remember with ORCID IDs, not only is it a great just kind of marker for you and a place where you can collect all that information, many funders and institutions are requiring ORCID IDs. And it's likely that ORCID IDs will be required in other areas such as publishing in the future. And you already see it quite often. You'll see on articles under the author's name, they oftentimes will feature their ORCID ID and such. With this in mind, if you haven't signed up, I encourage you to do so immediately. It just takes a couple minutes. I've got the website address here. You can type it into your phone and it'll take you to the site. And honestly, when I say a couple minutes, I mean 2 minutes. It doesn't take any time at all. So I encourage you to do that. All right, so once you've published, there are a number of things an author can do to increase the visibility and hopefully the citations to their work. But it does take some time and a clear strategy. So I thought we'd start with a case study relating to the article, The Impact of Participation in the Advanced Placement Program on Students' College Admissions Test Scores. Boy, that's a mouthful. This article was published in the Journal of Educational Research. So the article was published in May 2015, and the author was extremely proactive and created a multifaceted strategy using social media, blogs, and the publisher as well as the institutional press offices. And we worked with the author on PR and on promotion via social media. Now, interesting, the article was featured on the Education Week blog, which was very relevant to the subject area, and The Conversation, which, if you're not familiar with The Conversation, it's a news and analysis site. He created an infographic and a video abstract, all of which was included with his article on the website as supplemental material. And in 3 months, his article was downloaded over 1,600 times. It reached over 28,000 people via social media, as well as being featured in that previously mentioned media, that the conversation and such. The article now has reached well over 19,000 downloads. And we asked him to write an article for us about the approach he took, and I just wanted to read you part of this. He says, publicizing an article is work, but it's worth it. I've received more emails about my article in the past 2 months than I have about all of my other work in the previous year. Another university has invited me to visit because of my work, and my students are more excited about research because they see the attention it's getting. Not every article I write will be as interesting to the public, but I will definitely be working to do what I can to rustle up some interest in my work in the future. And one of the fastest growing areas of self-promotion and one of the most effective is social media, as many of you well know. We've noticed that social media tends to be a major driver in terms of article downloads. And this also impacts SEO rankings, i.e. where your article fall in that Google search. I'll be discussing altmetrics in a moment, but suffice it to say, it measures social media activity around your article. And keep in mind, if you are interested in reaching the general public, journalists use social media, especially Twitter, when sourcing content for their stories. So it's a really great way to reach out more broadly. And this is a few years old, but hopefully interesting as it gives the researcher perspective. This was published by Miriam Goldstein on the Soapbox Science blog, and it essentially breaks down in a fairly lighthearted way the decisions a researcher has to make when they choose to communicate their work. So on the right-hand side, the researcher has decided they want to communicate to the general public, or at least to those in the public that want to hear it. The purple boxes come in 3 different approaches. The first is if you want to create a new content, then you have different options based on how much time you have. So quick wins are to write a guest post on an established blog, or to employ support from your organization's public outreach team. More time would be needed to set up and update a Twitter channel, while the most intensive option is to start your own blog and build a community of followers. So secondly, if you want to build a community, then social media channels are the best option. Here it lists Facebook and Google+, which is a bit dated. I'd add LinkedIn. It's becoming a really important channel for researchers to connect as well. We see more and more professional groups forming on LinkedIn and researchers using this channel to reach out to peers and practitioners and just the wider public. Also, Twitter is especially key. Again, if you're interested in reaching journalists and people that are actively engaged in searching for new content. So Twitter is quite effective. When it comes to creating social media strategy, I'd suggest that you think about creating a professional presence. Which might mean that it's a separate account or that you approach your current accounts in a different way. And first of all, take the time to consider what you're hoping to achieve. So again, it comes down to strategy. Basically you need to think about who you want to reach, and you want to think about what types of social media would be the most effective in reaching those people. Who do you want to be in dialogue with? Once you've decided these 3 elements, then you can begin planning your strategy. And just as an example, I'm on Twitter. Don't bother following me because I'm absolutely passive on Twitter. I just read what other people are posting. But one of the groups of people that I tend to follow a lot are historians, especially in this current moment. And there are 3 historians in particular that I follow, and I think that it's interesting because I can see each of them took the time to think about what their strategy was going to be. So one is a historian from my former institution, and his approach is to engage with theory and share relevant research, and he's mainly engaging with other academics. So he's not as interested in engaging with the general public. The language he uses is very specific to his field, and other people might not respond to it. Another one kind of is balancing that between the scholarly world, and then the general public. So definitely engaging with other academics and sharing work and that sort of thing, but also trying to reach out to maybe policymakers and the general public, clarifying different processes and the history behind different aspects of our current politic. And he uses a lot of humor and some personal anecdotes, but not too many, not too many. And then the third person is definitely just interested in engaging with the kind of more general public and policymakers. And again, using historical knowledge to clarify things, but it's the language use is very common, lots of humor, lots of visuals and that sort of thing. So each of these people definitely took a different approach, and all successfully. So the one thing that you need to think about is building in time every day or week to manage your social media presence. Not only posting, but engaging with other people, asking thoughtful questions, making comments, and sharing relevant material. And do consider personalizing it, using humor, whatever it is to show your personality. Social networks are fertile ground for building your professional network. And I would say especially in this current situation. And here's some other basic tips, and some of these might be familiar to you. I'll just quickly go through these. Hashtags, this is your search capability, so they're great to use if you are interested in people finding what you're posting about. So you might have a key term, again, like you would use in an article, but it would be in your Twitter post. If you'd like to engage or share with someone, then you use their handle. So that's the @ with their name. So again, if you're sharing, say you've recently published an article where you engage with a key thinker's idea, you might @ them and, just to let them know that their work has been cited quite extensively or engaged with. You want to keep your posts to a reasonable length. If it's too long, people will probably skip over it. We've all experienced this on Facebook. Our friends that post, these very long posts, and it's hard to read. You can always provide links to articles and that sort of thing. So you can do a quick summary with a link. And conferences and other events are a great way to build your contact list and raise your profile digitally. So almost every conference is going to have a social media platform or that they are using just to engage and encourage debate and dialogue. So make sure to jump in and engage there. But as said, ask questions of others, try and drive the conversation. And this can even include calls to action or introducing discussions, asking a question, or introducing a theme to talk about. But irrespective of what you do with your social media, remember anyone can find your posts. So it is so important to always be respectful and professional. And this is another interesting study that I thought I'd share, and it's looking at how to drive interest and engagement in an article. So this article was by Toby Green, who worked with the OECD, and is really focused on open science and open access. And the article is called Maximizing Dissemination and Engaging Readers, the Other 50% of an Author's Day, a case study. Now, hopefully it doesn't take 50% of the day to do this kind of work, but let's just look at this. Basically, he used Kudos Tools, which is a site you can look up, and created a summary page which links directly to the article. And he stresses riding the wave. That means being aware of events and discussions and public statements and social media conversations that actually intersect with your work. So this comes back to creating your networks and being active on the appropriate social media sites, associations, and listservs and conferences where your potential community resides. He suggests being as strategic as possible. So that means if there's a major conference coming up and you're able to influence the publication timing, try and publish so it coincides with that event. And sometimes this is easier to do if you're publishing in a supplement or a special issue, or open access, but it does take some time and a lot of communication with the editor ahead of time and with the production team in the moment. So again, it's really about awareness about what's going on in your community. He stresses that you should be data-driven. You need to be monitoring and tracking your efforts to see what works and what doesn't work. And he also encourages people to be engaged and reactive. So use tools that monitor so that you can respond to comments and to shares. And I'll talk about one tool in just a moment. But this Kudos site could be a good place for you. And if you're part of a listserv or social media, promote your work and engage with the responses. So don't just post it, but if people are responding with it, make sure to engage. The key thing is to be active and to vary your approach. He also encourages people to find influencers if appropriate. So is there someone that you cite in your work? You can consider sending them the paper and politely let them know that you cited them and that it may be of interest. No more than that. And you really shouldn't expect anything in return. Sometimes people will engage, sometimes people are busy, but it's nice to let people know that you find their work useful. Right, so another tool that you can consider are video abstracts. So video abstracts obviously can also increase the visibility of your work. And this comes back to that search engine optimization, SEOs. And of course, one of the major search engines out there is YouTube. It's a very important search engine. It's great for sharing. And the thing about video abstracts is they tend to stand out on social media. So you can post an abstract. People might be more likely to click through. And there are many different approaches to video abstracts. Authors speaking passionately with clarity about their subject to a video for a video abstract. Or something that uses animation or visuals from a paper. There's many different things that you can look into do. And just for your information, we have created some guidance on how to create a video abstract, and you can find that on our Author Services website if you are interested in doing something like that. Right, so I mentioned altmetrics earlier, which is another way to measure your impact, or how I like to think of that. It kind of measures how your research travels outside of academia. So altmetrics are article metrics. So your articles downloads, the citations, and altmetric mentions. And you can find these on my authored works on TFO if you publish with us. Together, these are able to tell you kind of the reach of your research, as I said. So altmetrics tracks social media like Twitter and Facebook, even Pinterest and blogs, but it also tracks traditional media. So that could be mainstream media like The Guardian or The New York Times, or science-specific media like The New Scientist or Scientific American, and many non-English titles are covered as well. It also tracks movement on online reference managers like Mendeley and Cite You Like, and it will look at policy mentions. And the interesting thing is the donut. So that's the one thing that stands out. And the different colors in the donut shows what the mentions are made up of. So I'm just going to show you how that works. So these are the colors of the donut. So you can see all the different types of media that it's measuring, and this is constantly updating with different types of media. So, but as you see in the middle of this donut, there's a score there, and the score is based on three main factors. So the first factor is volume. So more mentions, higher score. But the thing to remember is it only counts one mention from each person in the same media. So that means you can't get up in the morning and, talk about your article again and again and again on Twitter. It's only going to count one mention. And then the second thing that they're looking at are sources. So some media is weighted more than others. So for instance, if your article is mentioned in a newspaper article, that will contribute more than a blog, which is valued higher than a tweet. So they all are valued slightly higher or in different levels. And then the last one is authors. So they review how often the author mentions a scholarly article. So tweets being pushed out highlighting articles by a journal editor or a publisher aren't going to be weighted as much as a tweet being pushed out by a practitioner who's sharing articles with each other. The sense is that if the author is tweeting about an article, or if the journal editor or publisher is tweeting about an article, that's promotion. So it's not weighted as heavily than if a doctor found the article and is now sharing it with his network. And I just wanted to show you this. You know, the thing about altmetrics is they're quicker to accumulate than citation-based metrics. By virtue of being sourced from the web and not from journals and books, it's possible to monitor and collate mentions of work online as soon as it's published. So here on this slide, you see these different tabs here. It'll have a summary of kind of the activity of your article with geographic breakdown of where the article is being shared and such. And then each tab is a different type of media. And you can click into the different tabs. So you can click into Twitter and see the actual tweets. You can see who's tweeting your work. And then that's a great opportunity for you to engage with them if you happen to miss that. Same with, you know, blogs. Maybe, you know, a blogger has been talking about your work, then you can contact them after the fact and talk to them about it. So it's a interesting resource. I encourage you to check it out. And before I finish today, I'd just like to highlight a couple resources that you can explore on your own after this website, what was I going to say? Webinar. The first is our How Researchers Change the World podcast and learning program. So every episode of How Researchers Change the World podcast features one researcher and one cutting edge piece of research that has shaped kind of the way we think today. And you'll hear the story behind the research directly from the researcher. So why was the topic so important to investigate, how the research was developed, and how it has gone on to impact the world we live in. And then alongside that, we've developed two 12-week learning programs for researchers. So one is designed for early career researchers, and that'll go through all the basics of publishing. And the second is for mid-career researchers, and that one focuses on increasing your impact. So anyhow, I encourage you to go check those out. It's free and really interesting, especially I really like the podcast a lot. And then lastly, just a shout out to our author services website. It offers support and guidance and tips on copyright and ethics and choosing a journal, checklists before submitting, how to tweet your research, and what to expect from peer review, etc. It's a lot of information. So feel free to go take a look at that to see if you can find some information that's useful. And that's it for me. I'm happy to take questions at this point.
Victoria, thank you so much. A very, very interesting and very well-structured presentation. Especially, I think, not only for me, but for many of the attendees, this is a very new subject about open access. Here in India, we're thinking more in a traditional, conventional way when it comes to publishing. It's been an eye-opener for me, and I'm sure it has been an eye-opener also for our attendees. Thank you so much. Very clear, and also I like very much the social media part. This gives me also kind of new ways of thinking how to you share your research not beyond the conventional platforms. So really thank you for that. Questions are pouring in now. I have a few which I would like to share with you. We can, I think, spend some minutes on that. One question was, is there another option to publish open access by using the university repository? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so what you're talking about there is a type of open access I didn't talk about. So that's green open access, what we would call green open access. And that's when you publish in a subscription-based journal. So the content is
Mm,
protected, by behind what they say a paywall. So you wouldn't have access
mm,
to it unless you had a subscription. And Green Open
mm.
Access, basically what you're doing is submitting your accepted manuscript. So it's not the PDF, that final version of record. It's the version that was accepted during peer review, but has not been sent on to the production team to typeset and turn into a PDF. Now,
Okay.
the thing about Green Open Access, though, it's great to submit those into a repository, but many times most often journals have what's called an embargo period, and it can be at Taylor and Francis. Our embargo periods are from 6 to 18 months, depending on discipline. So, arts and humanities and social sciences is 18 months because the idea is the research lives longer, whereas going towards the hard sciences, it's going to be a shorter embargo period. So it's really important that you just do your due diligence and research on that before you go that route.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Another question was, are my chances limited to get my paper accepted if English is not my first language? These are often questions we get, of
Yeah,
course, like if I'm not a native speaker, then are my
yeah.
chances, how is it with Taylor and Francis?
I think it's not so much Taylor and Francis, it's different journals and that sort of thing. But this is a question I get everywhere. I get it in Sweden, even though people here, their English levels, they start studying English in kindergarten. But there
Mm,
is a concern um, about that, the polished language. And when I've asked editors across disciplines, what's your feeling about this? Should people send their papers to language editing services before submitting? And I hear consistently, as long as I can understand the argument and as long as I can understand the data, I'm happy to look at something. So what I encourage people to do is try and find either a native English speaker or someone who has an extensive experience publishing in English to take a look at your
mm,
paper and give you really critical feedback on it. Find the mean people, with the red pen that will rip your paper apart. I think that's a great start. And then if you really feel like the language isn't there are tons of editing services out there. Some journals
yeah,
offer that for free. So it's just about, looking on the publisher website and seeing what your options are.
I think this is a very good suggestion, like to find somebody to look through the grammar, through the
Yeah.
style of writing, and help you to polish a bit your English if you feel it's a bit not as good as it could be.
Yeah.
Um, there was a question. What if the paper gets rejected in an open access? Can one then should one submit again or look for another? Like, is there like do you see patterns? Like, do people then should they submit again or?
It would be, the thing about open access journals, people always want to think that they're different than regular journals. They're not. It's just
Yeah,
a slightly
yeah,
different business model, actually, at the end of the
yeah,
day.
yeah,
So the process is the same. If
yeah.
your article is rejected from an open access journal, unless it was a reject and resubmit, you should
Mm,
move on to a new journal. And it could be an open
okay.
access journal. It could be a subscription-based journal. But yeah, it's the same processes with
Yeah.
standard journals.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's very important to know that there's no like it's just a different format of journal and quality wise there is no I would say you're not losing any quality if submitting with a good peer reviewed open access journal. But
Yeah.
there is the question also here like for my CV. Would you recommend to have publications in open access or non-open access? But you kind of answered that already.
Yeah. I mean, what I will say is that, there's so much pressure, and perhaps you're aware of this, but I mean, especially in Europe, there's so much pressure from funders for publishers to flip those traditional journals into
Mm,
open access journals. And the tide is moving in that direction. So publishers themselves are looking at their traditional journals that have always been subscription-based journals and saying, which ones could we consider flipping into an open access journal, converting into an
mm,
open access journal. So you're going to see more and more journals becoming open access. And again,
right, right.
it's just about the quality. Do the same due diligence with an open access journal as you would with any other journal. What research are they publishing? Are these the people I want to be in conversation with? Think about the characteristics of the journal that are important to you. Does it tick those boxes? Yeah, you know your community better than anyone, so you'll know what's important.
True, true. Victoria, is there like a Taylor and Francis guide for researchers on how to use social media? Because you gave a very good presentation on that, but is there any open access guide available for that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, those two last resources. So the first one, that How Researchers Change the World, that learning program, there's a program that's labeled for early career researchers and one for mid-career researchers. I actually think it doesn't matter what stage you're at. That second one is all about increasing your impact. So that's a good place to go. They're just short, like little chapters, 2 to 3 pages with suggestions. And then also on our author services website, there's going to be, plenty of material about how you can promote your work.
Yeah, that you were mentioning at the end of your presentation, the authors website. That's a good platform to go and check. Another question related to social media was, can I share also, like, should I share unpublished work on social media, like which has not been published, or maybe it's better to have it in a blog, or what do you recommend here?
Yeah, well, I mean, for unpublished work, there's a lot of ways that you can share unpublished work. Most people share unpublished work on preprint servers. Social media, we're talking about, again, think about anything that you share on social media should be pretty short. So you might share an idea. You might test an idea on Twitter, like a theory, and put it out there. Again, trying to drive dialogue, or yeah, it could be anything. It could be a theory. It could be a piece of evidence that you find intriguing and you want to kind of get a community discussion going on. Of course, you want to be a little bit careful about how much data and how much of your work you share online before it's published, because you don't want to be scooped. So it's a fine balance. You want to be sensible about it, but you wouldn't share a whole article on social media. That's too much. No. It's too much.
Yeah, true. A longer question here. I'm just reading it. Is there any particular way to find a more suitable journal for written articles to publish? And if so, what's the process, or how to find it? How to make sure, in case if you're not a regular reader of that particular journal?
Yeah, I mean, choosing a journal is really tricky. If you find a journal that you think is interesting, I just encourage you to look at the content and think, will the work that I'm currently engaged on fit? Does it fit this journal? But at the beginning of the talk, I showed that little tool, the journal suggester, and that's a great one. You can just write an abstract of what your paper is about, plop it in there, and it's going to give you a list of journals that would likely be appropriate. And then you can go through and look at those journals and see if it actually is appropriate. And we're not the only publisher that has this tool. I think other publishers have similar, if they might be called something different, but similar tools that you can use. Yeah, but yeah, it's tough.
Again,
and I will tell you, the number one reason that articles are rejected from journals is because it doesn't fit the aims and scope of the journal. So it's really important that you do take time making that decision.
True. That's very important. So also with, if you publish your thesis or a book. Yeah. Again, the question, is there any quality difference in open access and paid journal publications? But I think you said it already, but maybe you could repeat it one more time.
Yeah, I mean, there shouldn't be any quality difference. I think people have been wary about open access because of the rise of the predatory publisher. And there was a lot of damage done. But as long as that journal is published by a respected publisher, and again, thinking about those organizations that I listed, OASPA and DOAJ, if it's indexed there should be nothing wrong with it. I mean, the editorial processes should be no different than a traditional journal. So quality shouldn't be, you just see the same variation of quality that you do in normal journals. You have your high impact journals, and then you have your journals that maybe aren't as high of quality.
Yeah, true. There was one, I think that was about scope here. One question: how can new researchers target a specific journal? As some journals don't give a wide scope of the journal, and most publications are rejected at this stage. Could you add more alternatives other than to look for the scope of the journal?
Well, I mean, that's your starting point. It's the aims and scope statement, because the aims and scope statement will tell you what the journal's about. And some of those aims and scope statements will always be on the journal website, either on the landing page or there'll be a link to it on the side. Editors spend so much time crafting these statements because they tend to be short and they want to be really clear about this is a research that we're interested. Also looking at the journal, actually reading the journal. I mean, you don't have to read every article, but going through and seeing what they're publishing currently. Does it match with what you're doing? You know, is it in the same neighborhood? Have they published research that's similar to yours in the past? And if they have, you should be engaging with that research in your article. Again, you're joining a conversation that's ongoing in that journal. But the other thing is, think about your own community, the people that read your work regularly, and especially those that have a lot of experience publishing. I know that when I was in grad school, I went to my advisor and said, okay, where should I be considering publishing? And he knew my work better than anyone. He could say here, here, and here. So think about the resources you have locally that can help you as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Just one more question regarding, what is the average time for peer reviewers to respond?
I have never done a webinar and not received this question. Yeah, this is a tricky question. So what I can say is the guidance that we give. You know, at Taylor and Francis, we have a lot of journals in the arts and humanities and social sciences. So you might be familiar with Routledge. But we also have journals in medicine. So it's a pretty wide span of subject areas and different practices, and peer review takes different lengths of time in those different subject areas. But what we do say to our editors is the first decision, you really should be trying to get the first decision to the author within 90 days, you know. And again, you know, when the work is, you know, kind of text heavy, arts and humanities, theory, that sort of thing, sometimes it can take a bit longer because it's you know, different type of assessment that has to go on. But, you know, what I would say is that if you have been, you know, you've submitted your paper and you're waiting and 3 months passes, it's not unusual to contact the editor and just say, can I get an update? Sometimes I was doing a session with an editor yesterday and he said he doesn't actually mind it because then it gives him the opportunity to go to the peer reviewer and say, hey, can you speed things up? I've heard from the author, you know, so that gives them a tool to go in with. So, you know, but as I say, if after 3 months you haven't heard anything, feel free to check in.
Good, yeah, that should be a good kind of average time. Victoria, was one question. Can you tell us the average rejection rate on Taylor and Francis journals? Like, do you have any data on that? Like,
yeah, I want to say, you know, I can talk about the list that I have worked on traditionally, which was mainly comprised of Scandinavian journals, and the competitive level varied a lot. Some of them were, you know, pretty small humanities journals to journals that were within medicine. And I would say that the average rejection rate probably, and don't quote me on this because I'm really going from memory here, but I would say around 75%. And that's what, you know, kind of the average, but some were a lot lower, some were a lot higher. Once you get an impact factor and you're in the second or third quartile, you're looking at well above 80 for a rejection rate.
Okay.
Yeah. But it does vary depending on discipline. It really does.
On a discipline, yeah. Okay. I see one more question, but it's a bit of a technical. I don't know if it's possible for you to answer, but I'll try. Okay, try. Could you please explain how pre-printing on ARXIV works? Does this ring a bell?
On archive? Could that be archive?
Yeah,
Could be.
yeah, must
Yeah,
be Wellington,
Archive's
yeah.
the oldest. Yeah, that's the oldest preprint server. I think it was launched in '93 out of Cornell University, and basically it's no different than any other preprint server. It's kind of the model that everyone's based, preprint servers on. And so what happens is you post your work up there, and then hopefully get feedback from your community. The key is when you do subsequently, submit to a journal, because on a preprint server, there's no peer review or anything like that. It's more community feedback, more informal in that sense. But eventually you'll probably want to turn that into an article. So when you do submit and it's already on a preprint server, it's really important to let the editor know. This can be found on arXiv, and put a link to where the article is, just so the editor knows, and that sort of thing. And then once the article is accepted and published, you go back to that preprint, and then you attach the link to the final version of the article so that people can see the article after all the improvements that have been made through peer review.
Okay,
So that's how it works pretty much.
I think your answer also gives clarity to the follow-up question, whether sending the same manuscript to a journal qualifies as plagiarism or violation of publication ethics. So if you inform the editors that it's already on arXiv, then it should be no problem, right?
Just everything is about. Yeah, everything's about transparency, and make sure to cite it in your paper as well, that this was previously posted on that. But most journals now, it used to be a problem before. People were really wary of preprint servers, but I think all of our journals now accept articles that were previously posted on preprint server, arXiv or bioRxiv or whatever.
Okay, I think we can conclude here. It has been, we have been good in time. I think very relevant questions to all of you. And Victoria, once again, thank you so much for giving this presentation. And is there possibility to share your presentation with the audience? Can we?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
yeah,
we will send
a PDF. Yeah.
Yeah. So we will send Victoria and my presentation along with the recording of this webinar to you, probably by the end of this week. And I would like to say thank you for joining in. I really hope you have now a better understanding, and I'm sure you have, of open access journals. And start your search now, like go immediately after this webinar to your laptop and desktop and start searching and find a suitable journal and try your luck with submitting. And yeah, have a nice day, nice evening here in India, nice ettermiddag in Sweden.
Vad duktig.
Yeah, thank you so much again, Victoria. Take good care, all of you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.